Whether you are a new player in Honkai Star Rail or maybe you've been playing for day one, I want to give you a range of teams that anyone can fill for Jiaoqiu and also best team compositions for this particular unit in the current game state and future game states as well. First things first, what does he do? For any of you who are wondering his overall kit, the easiest way to think about it is like a 5-star version of Quek. Now, on a simple terms, he does buff damage. He does apply a debuff to the enemy that is does consider as burn as well. So he does classify into the DOT category and improves out damage overall. But he's not just a 5-star Quek. He also has a lot more stats, making him a lot more survivable as a nihility character, making DOT teams much more viable for him because they tend to take damage across the board. Where does he fall in the spectrum of the current teams available in Honkai Star Rail? We have 8 teams over here. If you haven't seen the video, the 8 teams of Honkai Star Rail, do check that one out. It goes into more detail on what these 8 teams are and how you should build your overall account. But for Jiaoqiu's sake, he fulfills mainly these 2 categories here, DOT and debuff. Some people are saying he used to have like kits that could be hyper carry and maybe Eidolons, but for this video, I want to touch specifically on like a E0 base copy Jiaoqiu. I don't want to talk about like E6 and stuff like, because not everyone is going to have that kind of resources to pull this unit. If you want more of such information, do leave in the comments below. But mainly, he's fulfilling a DOT and debuff bracket. For any of you who are looking to buff up your team in these 2 categories, Jiaoqiu is definitely the man for you to consider. Now let's go ahead in the first team composition for Jiaoqiu, and that is going to be a very simple Akirion team. Not to worry, for those of you who are wondering, I don't have Akirion at all. I don't even have her at E0, let alone E2. If you take a look at our video here on 2.5, 2.6, 2.7 rerun predictions, you'll be actually quite pleasantly surprised to see the upcoming predictions. You might find that interesting as well. Akirion could be coming out real soon. How quickly? You might want to check that video out. I think it's going to be quite interesting for you as well. Akirion teams, regardless of whether you have her at E0 or E2, or whether you plan to pull for her in the future, this is going to be useful for you. Let's first talk about the more simple one that most people might have, which is E0 or E1 Akirion. Why I make the distinction is because at E2 you don't really need 2 nihility characters. At E0 you need 2 nihility characters in order to proc like the maximum buff that she has. The options that you have for Akirion right now before Jiaoqiu is actually quite limited. You have maybe Quek, you have Pella, you have Silver Wolf, you have Welt. These are some of the options and you're forced to run like 2 out of 4 of them. Most of the time people are running like Quek, Pella and Akirion because 2 4 stars and 1 5 stars is like very, very affordable for a lot of free-to-play players out there who just don't have the resources to put everything. In this case, I think that Jiaoqiu offers a very good replacement for a character like Quek. Offers out damage buffing, burn DOT on the enemies as well. Also increasing a lot of damage and offering some damage on the side since being a burn character as well, with much better scaling compared to a Quek who's like 4 star. So not only do you get higher damage, you also get better survivability in the team compositions. I'm sure some of you notice if you don't run a good sustain, Pella and Quek can die quite easily, which is very, very frustrating for a lot of people having to restart that run. This also allows you to even open up an opportunity to slap in a character like Kafka in the pivot slot with a character like Akirion and Jiaoqiu, because Jiaoqiu does offer good amounts of burn damage as well for what it's worth. But I'm not going to put it in here just to confuse people because this is mainly focused on the Akirion team compositions, but I'll just add in some remarks on the side. Utility slot here is pretty much going to be the same for both E0 or E2. We are really focusing on either debuffing the enemy a bit more with the top row, or for example better sustain for the overall team, but generally utility slot is probably the least important out of the 3 of the other slots, especially in the Akirion team, because you want to maximize that nihility bonuses as well. For E2 here, your flexibility is much more because Jiaoqiu is probably going to be best in the slot for Akirion right now in terms of filling the nihility role as well as doing a lot of AoE buffing, out damage buffing, and offering tons of debuffs on the enemies too. So in the pivot slot here, we can then shift to something that focuses on getting a lot of damage. We do give out a little bit on the debuff placement here from the nihility slot, but Jiaoqiu offers a lot, and if you're running like Akirion or maybe a character, for example, Preservation with Trend of Universal Market that is able to proc some burn DOT when enemies hit them, or Gallagher, for example, characters in the utility slot that already provide a lot of debuff, you can then shift your attention to very offensive supports like Runmei, who offers massive amounts of damage buffing. You have Robin, you have Sparkle, all offering a lot of damage buffing in their overall kit as well, helping you get crazy numbers with E2. So that is really the differences between of E2 and E0. One is fulfilling more of the criteria for the nihility category. One is boosting up that damage by like 80% or 90% in some cases for harmony characters to double down. Other than that, of course, the second category, and these are not the only two categories, I have more for you, but let's talk about the more popular ones first, and that is going to be like a premium DOT team. Some of you are wondering, EOD, I don't have all these characters. These are just mainly concepts right now, and if you have them, great. If you don't, of course, Black Swan hasn't appeared yet. If I'm not wrong, you check out the predictions video on the reruns. Yeah, I can't recall at the top of my head. Kafka, of course, has already had a first rerun, but definitely more DOT characters likely will be introduced in future. Maybe second reruns will come soon. But this is an example of a premium DOT team right now, probably the best DOT team out there, which is a character like Jiaoqiu for the burn AoE, the damage amplification buffing, you have out damage increase, etc. Tons of damage already from burn. You have lightning here for lightning DOT from Kafka. She also pops the burn DOTs, wind shear DOTs, and etc. all with her skill. Very nice. Black Swan is of course the main DPS of this team, which helps you set the tempo and damage of the overall team too, which is one of each element, so one wind, one lightning, one fire. Very nice. And Ho gives a lot of energy to the rest of the team and attack, which is what DOT team needs. Premium, very expensive, so let me give you a cheaper alternative because I wanted to make something available for everyone. If you don't have the money to buy all the premium characters, maybe you missed their reruns, you're not boxed out of DOT teams yet, here are some options. A good alternative to Black Swan if you don't have her is Sampo. He offers good amounts of wind shear as well, and also some of relatively more supportive yet offensive role at the same time. You can consider an alternative is Sampo Koski too. An alternative to Kafka, you can consider going for Esther, who buffs fire damage bonus, attack bonus for the entire team, so your other DPSs here can get a boost. Maybe you pull for Black Swan and then you can pair together with a character like Esther as well. Going to be pretty good. Kuei Naifen, of course, you can run in the same team, a lot more fire. It's interesting to see whether his debuff is considered the same as Burn, but it's unlikely since Kafka's and or rather Kafka's Light Cone and Black Swan's Wind Shear is considered different from Shock, as well as Wind Shear like from Sampo Koski, the 4-star alternative. So I think you can probably stack Kuei Naifen's and Jiaoqiu's Burn, but that's one of the ways you can play it. You can also run Luca Bleed and maybe to some extent like Serval's Shock, but I think Serval is more of a crit-based character, not much of a character kit skills with DOT. Other than that, if you are looking for a utility slot for some more burn DOT, you can consider running Trend of Universal Market, which is a light cone you can put on preservation characters. When enemies hit them, they have a chance of getting burned. So preservation units like Aventurine, characters like Fu Xuan, characters like Natasha is an alternative, but preservation characters can use this light cone. Natasha is like if you really have no other choice. She's still quite decent and in a free-to-play team composition too. So that is a DOT team. And let's talk about the next team, which is going back to like the debuffing category of team compositions that we were talking about previously. So zooming in again on the debuff, and another alternative for those of you who don't have Akirion, don't want Akirion at all, is probably considering a doctor ratio team composition. And he of course hasn't had his first banner rerun, so any of you who are looking up for his character, this upcoming character, could likely see him maybe in the near future too. Who knows when he's going to come back to Honkai Star. He hasn't had his first rerun, so it's likely going to be sooner or later. With Doctor Ratio team composition, I'm thinking more of a hyper carry kind of style. If you don't plan to run together with a character like Topaz and Nambi, if you want to run a Topaz and Nambi, Jiaoqiu very nicely buffs both of them, so it's a good option, especially if you don't have a Robin. Maybe you are running without Robin, you're running, for example, her in another team, or you didn't pull her. This is a pretty good alternative also. Otherwise, you can run a hyper carry doctor ratio where you are really focusing on buffing his overall damage as much as you can, from the likes of Pella adding more debuffs, Silverwolf adding more debuffs, and defense shredding with these two for doctor ratios, massive damage. Of course, Jiaoqiu himself deals damage increase, debuffs the enemy as well, and increases out damage. Robin here, very, very strong harmony unit. Tingyun, Sparkle, more or less similar in line, helping to maximize the amount of damage. Although they don't offer debuffing, but it's still very, very substantial, the amount of damage that they contribute to Doctor ratio. Especially if you are running like Akirion in the other half, you can always run Pella in the other half to get them. You have a lot of options for Doctor ratio too. For the utility side of things, Adventuring likely is going to be best in slot. A lot of people play him together with Doctor ratio, but maybe you didn't pull him. Full Shen is another alternative. If you have the trend of Universal Market, you can add in more debuffs into the mix. Otherwise, most other sustained characters will be okay-ish to run. We can see, for example, if you had like some abundance characters like Ho Ho, characters like Luo Ca, or okay, generally they might be a bit squishier, especially if you're running with lower budget options. There are 4 stars, so that's one of the key things to point out. Be careful of your pivot slot not dying. That's why like 5 stars limiteds are much more recommended than the other 4-star counterparts, especially since Pella tends to be a bit squishy in these team compositions. So, last team. New player teams. Now this is a dedicated section for any of you who are just joining the game, very new. I want to give something for everyone, and if you guys, experienced players at this point, have any recommendations and thoughts, leave in the comments below. I'm sure people who are new to the game will appreciate your thought process, your content, your concepts as well. So share it with new players. I'm sure they will find it very, very helpful. And for any of you new players, my recommendation of a starting team, if you are very interested in this character Jiaoqiu, will probably be a character like Esther, Serval, and Natasha. Why no like husbando team compositions for free-to-play players is unfortunately most of the characters that work very well with him as a free-to-play player likely is going to be most of these units here. Esther offers fire damage buffing. She offers a lot of attack bonuses which DOT characters like, have a lot of speed pushing the entire team, so helps them move very fast, do more damage. Serval here offers you a little bit of DOT, a little bit of crit, some elemental diversification, so you have a bit of lightning as well. It helps you figure out whether you like the DOT playstyle or whether you prefer the traditional crit playstyle. Offers you a lot of AoE, which Serval benefits from a character, for example, like Jiaoqiu also. And Natasha is a very good stable support that you can use for the majority of the early game. Other options, these are a bit more gacha because they aren't guaranteed any free-to-play player can get, will be Sampo Koski or Gui Naifen as well. You can substitute them for Serval if you manage to get them from pooling on one of their banners. That is an alternative as well. But yeah, that is my opinions of all the team compositions. If you appreciate the content in this video, do like and subscribe for more of such future content. At this point, I highly recommend you check out our video on the 8 teams of Honkai Star Rail, and as well as the other Jiaoqiu content we have on the channel. I think it's going to be very helpful as you're building your overall account in a gacha game like Honkai Star Rail. And thank you guys again so much for watching. See you in the next video.